Hello everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's show, we're going to take a peek at some of the early transition stages of my bonsai from outdoors to indoors and getting the cold frames ready. I've had a lot of people inquiring on the YouTube channel about some winter storage, the cold frame, and trees indoors. I've also had some comments recently about the humidity level in rooms, and so we're going to try to touch base on all those and cover those. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I do, what I have done in my quarters of trees, where I keep my trees. Hey everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. In the sense that I have a branch that splits into two shoots in here, so I'm probably going to cut this thing off right about here this fall. I've taken my knob cutter and I've gotten rid of some of that. So I just put them on the bottom, growing upwards into the bag. We fill it up with trees and then we water as we need to. Try to get rid of those air pockets. So first, the plant room has completely changed. So I had a room in my basement that I had put all together for the plant room, and it's kind of a small room, 12 feet by about 7. And that's where I had a fish tank, and I had some plants in there, and it was getting kind of crowded. And now I am in my college. Now I'm in the recycled bedroom of my son Toby. So Toby went off, is living on his own, and is in a technical college, going to become a carpenter, loving life, enjoying life, but he's far away from home, which is sad. It's a bummer. I miss him dearly. But there's always a silver lining. And so the silver lining for me is that his room has become now my new plant room, which is now more like a 12, 15 or so by 12 to 15 square, with a bigger light over here coming in from the north facing, so I don't have a south facing window. But I have my plants behind me. I'll give you a quick tour. I'll show you the old room first, and then I'll show you kind of what's going on here in this room besides the plants that you're seeing right behind me. So let's take a peek. So the first big change of the plant room is my son's old 75-gallon tank has become the goldfish tank, where all the fish that used to be in the pond about a week ago now have their new home. A little dark in here, so let's turn on the lights. So this is the old plant room. Back wall was the fish tank, where I have the bonsai on top, the fish tank that I had made the cabinet for. Now we have a couple tables in the back. On the shiplapped wall, we've got a nice comfy chair there, and the fish tank off to the left. So this is going to become the kids' game room. They're hoping to get a nice big screen TV back there, where they can then work on mastering the levels of the many games that they play that I really don't follow very well and don't know really what they're doing. Okay, I know about some games, but the plant room has been cleaned up and is now on the way to being a game room. As we enter the new room, the old high school boys' room, we got the plants on the back wall. So this is my workbench area. We got all kinds of trees that are getting some light from some LED grow lights. I got my Unifun back there that's off right now because it puts off that pinkish purple color. But we got some trees back there on the bench. Ficus, Portulacara afra, more ficus, ficus cuttings. And there's the magnificent but very interesting Fukien tea. Can't see it as well because of the other stuff in the background. You see how leggy it's gotten again? And we got my log repurposed as a bonsai pot back there with the brush cherry ficus, the watermelon seed ficus. We got some cuttings. We have one of my pond plants here sitting in a nice glass of water. Going to see how long I can keep that together and maybe propagate that. The new wall for the fish tank that I made the stand for. We got the ficus forest in the back left with the grow light, so that Unifun is still on. It's a Unifun, about 12 inch by 12 inch light, about 6 inches from my trees. Got a aloe back there. And in the tank this time, we've kind of cleaned it out a little bit. We got a nice largemouth bass back there that the kids caught. Wait a minute, is that even legal? And if you notice a couple of downed trees in the pretend pond, yep, that's the Bonsai graveyard. The larger one there is one of my junipers that bit the dust this year. I threw it in the outdoor pond, let it sink to the bottom, get all waterlogged, and now it's in my fish tank. The other one, that was the crepe myrtle that I was so excited about. One of the most expensive trees I bought so far to date. And now it's in the bottom of the bass tank. Oh well, we're living and learning. I turned off the Unifun light with all the purple and pink colors just to show you the forest in here. This is after I took off, about half of the plants from here and put them in individual pots. And this is what's left. And after reading Michael Hagedorn's book, Bonsai Heresy, I learned something very important about pots that are this big, where the roots have a long way to go. We're going to talk about that in a future episode. So we'll let these grow a little bit longer. When I repot this a little bit later on this winter, I'm going to repot it in a different way because of what I learned from Michael Hagedorn's book. I've read it twice through. It's a great book. I can't wait to read some more about it so I can remember all the things that he was able to share. So the ficus forest is doing fine, and we'll keep growing it. And on a future episode, we'll talk about why I'm going to replant it in a different way. So the last room I'll talk to you about is one of the two closets. So there are two closets in this bedroom, pretty deep, pretty big. And in this room, my son and I made this double fish tank stand where we got a 40-gallon down below, and we got the 20-gallon up above, and we've got some fish in there as well. We got a couple of the medium-sized goldfish from the pond outside, some feeder fish, if I could say that, down there at the bottom, and some of those feeder fish are feeding the bass and the sunnies, which are in here. Now the lights just kicked off just before I started filming, so we don't get too much algae growth. But there's the sunfish kind of staring at us, wondering if I'm going to give them some more food. A little dark. But the most important part of the fish closet is the other part of my plant room. Got a grow light up on top and some more ficus, some Christmas cactus. And we also have in there some Portucara afras. We're going to talk about a plant in here in a future episode that has a little itty bitty orange blossom in there. The show I did this before was called the Orange Blossom Special. And in the Orange Blossom Special, I still haven't found the name of this house plant, but I put them into some bonsai pots, and I was excited to see if they would bloom. And there we've got some orange blooms, and we'll show you that update in a future episode as well. But for right now, there's the inside of the closet that holds even more of the plants. A quick tour of the new plant room, thanks to my son, who now is out there in college. Kind of in the real world, as some people say. Doing well, and the house now has walls. They have floors in there. They're working on the ceiling, or the rafters in the next week or so. Learning a ton and loving life. And I kind of have to say, I kind of like the extra space in the plant room. So a lot of my winter episodes are going to be recorded right here in the room, and I'm going to mix it up and change things up so we can get some better views of everything. It's all kind of still hodgepodge all together. But I had to make room for everything because I got a lot of plants here now. It keeps growing every year. On the show today, we're going to talk about some cold frame situations. And we're going to talk about this plant room and kind of how I keep it the way it's being kept. It's an experiment this year because it is a bigger room. I do have 3 fish tanks in this room, but the room is twice as large. So we're going to see, and I'll show you a couple of different temperatures and humidity spots in the room, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. First up though, let's go ahead and check in with the cold frames. So one of the things I want to mention about the cold frames up front, that is make sure you clean them out before you put your plants in. So we're in the first weekend in October, and before you know it, it's going to be Halloween. And so when Halloween kicks in, we know that hard frost is going to already have happened once or twice, and we're going to have to start thinking about getting these trees in. But we're expecting a lot of temps into the 60s for the next week, lows in the 40s. We're still just fine outside for quite a long time. And many of my trees are winter hardy for Minnesota zone anyway, and some of them that are not, they can get cold. We just don't want to have the big fluctuations in temperature. So make sure you can have a little bit of protection. But I saw in a post recently someone talking about bringing their trees inside. Well, if it was outside and it was only 50 for a couple of days, and then you bring it inside to like the 70s for a couple of days, and then you bring it back outside, and okay, then you're going to have your various temperature extremes, if you will. And that may be not good for the plant as well. So all the trees that I have outside can all freeze if they had to. We just don't want the ones that don't belong in Minnesota long term to get in that negative territory, hard freezes, solid ice there in the pots. But a couple of days of really low temperatures is really not going to harm the plants at this point. And the plants have to get into that slow stage of going into hibernation, right? They have to go dormant for 6 to 8 weeks minimum for most of the species that are in my cold frames. And the Minnesota hardy trees, they have to go dormant. And a lot of people talk about a 6 to 8 week dormancy. And then if you slowly reintroduce them to some warmth, you could do that if you had a greenhouse or you had a way to really monitor the temperatures and all that. So for me, I got to clean those cold frames and get them ready for the storage. First, we're going to go outside and we're going to clean up my cold frames, and then we'll come back inside and talk more about the inside of my plant room and some of the adjustments I'm going to make with these plants in here. We're rolling up the sleeves, and we are going to clean out the cold frame. This is my garage cold frame. If you'd like to know a little bit more information about this garage cold frame, you can check out one of my earlier YouTube videos on the garage cold frame. I'll make sure I put that in the video so you know where to look. I'm going to take out all my supplies from the cold frame. We're outside taking care of the cold frame today because we want to make sure that our trees stay healthy when they're in the garage and in the cold frame. So, real quickly, this is an old shelving unit, and I do have the styro around. I got on the bottom, the top, the back that you can't see, the two sides, and I have a little gap here between the edge and the shelf so I can have room for cables that go through and also for the heat to come through. So that heat's got to sit right there, and the heat comes through here, and I've curved out these guys right there. I've put holes in here so we get some rotation. So for today, we're going to move the thermostat regulated heat source. We're moving out the heat source. We're rolling up the sleeves again, and use your disinfectant. So whether you're going to use some bleach, whether you're going to use some spray that you have, you could bring out some Clorox, some 409, anything you use to disinfect. Most of us probably have a ton of disinfectant in our house these days with the COVID. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to clean out all of these walls, all of these ceilings. What's nice about this recycled shelf unit, something to consider, is this is a wainscoting in the back, painted. This was painted 2 different times, so there's 2 coats of paint on here. It's a little dirty and getting old. But with the painted walls, it's easy to clean. We don't have a lot of dirt that's just gonna be clinging to these walls because they're pretty smooth, and it's not gonna soak in this water through and through and create issues for us. So if you have an old shelving system, and you throw a coat of paint on there, then you're going to be in good shape. Now this won't be sparkling white when I'm done, but more importantly, I'm getting rid of any leftover remnants from the trees last winter and spring. We're just giving this a good old sponge down with some bleach to clean it all out. And this has several weeks to dry out. I'm going to let it air out today with the glorious sunshine, and we'll be in good shape when it all dries out. I'm still about 4 weeks from putting my trees in the cold frame, partly because I know that the next couple of weeks forecast we're going to have highs in the 60s and the 70s, and so the trees are still pushing out a little bit as they prepare for their dormancy period. So they're not pushing out big growth or anything. What I mean by pushing out is the roots are active, because the roots are well above 50 degrees for most of the next week or two. There are some cool downs at night. Tonight we'll get down into the mid 30s, but then we'll have lows in the 40s for a couple of weeks, highs in the 60s and 70s. So the roots are still active. The daylight is getting less. So to get our trees kicked into fall gear, the sun is lower in the southern hemisphere, right? We got the sun going down, less light, less heat. We've had dry conditions, so the leaves have been changing, of course, with our fall conditions. Cool nights, dry conditions, leaves start to change. My bonsai on the bench haven't changed dramatically yet, but that's because they get better watering than the community has gotten from our lack of rain. So my trees are still showing some green, and they're starting to do some early changing. There we have it. Didn't take anything but a few minutes. Make sure you get it good and clean. We're going to let this dry out, so this is all ready to put the trees in, and we'll talk about that when I actually put the trees in, and we can put that real quickly into another episode on the YouTube. But for today, just wanted to remind you all that when you're preparing your cold frame, do it now when it's beautiful. The sun came out today. Have your cold frame built, ready to go, and clean it up so it is all ready. When this dries up, I'll put everything back in it, and we'll start to get it preset, a little staging for when the trees come in. So there you have it, a little quick washing of the cold frame to keep our trees safe. Now inside my cabin cold frame, I've got an issue. So I insulated the cabin cold frame last year and got this layer of wood on here, and with all the trees that were crammed in here, and when I watered in here, I noticed the humidity got awfully high here sometimes during the winter, even during the cold, dry winter. The humidity would be up a little bit higher, and I got some parts of the cabin that got just little indications of some mold developing. So this year, before I clean this out, well, actually two things have to happen. I'm going to clean it out, all the leaves and the dirt and the dust, I'm going to clean it out today. But I can't disinfect it and put trees in yet, because what I need to do is I need to put a coat of varnish or stain on here, some kind of sealant, so the water is going to repel off these walls and not just want to soak into the wood, whether it's the shelves, this shelf here, these temporary window shelves. My main thing I want to do is I want to put a layer of stain or protectant on these inside walls, and not so much the roof, but I might do the roof as well, but just these four walls and the flooring. But it's a little too cold to do this now. The sun was out earlier, but the clouds have come over. We're hovering around that 50-degree range, but it's supposed to get up into the 60s and 70s next week. So this will have to wait for a few days, so I have some better optimal drying days with the stain. So we'll clean out the dust, the cobwebs, get it all sweeped out. We'll do that today, and then I'll have to varnish it and then make sure it's all ready to go for the trees a little bit later on. So let's head back inside and go into the plant room and finish our talk there for this episode, and we'll show the plant or the cold frame cabin style. We'll show that in a future episode after I get some work done. All right. So with the cold frames all cleaned out, we are ready to put some trees inside there. I'm not ready to do that now because it's early October, and as I had mentioned earlier, temps into the 60s, sunshine, and glorious time for the trees to continue to slowly go down and get into their resting mode. They're clean, they're ready to go. I'm ready for Halloween when we have that next full moon, blue moon, and if temps like take a nosedive after that, we'll start moving those trees in, and we'll do some recording on that then. So now we're back in the plant room, so let's talk about the plant room and kind of how I'm going to adjust things in here a little bit and what I've noticed so far in this new plant room. Okay, we'll talk about the humidity factor, and we'll talk about, again, my experience and what I've seen with these tropical plants that I have inside. With no real south-facing window, I got the north-facing window, but I have all my lights here that are doing a pretty good job, and they've worked so far for me. So let's talk about that next. In the back end of the wall where the plants are loving life with the lights right now, I'm going to show you my first thermometer here. And people have talked about thermometers not being calibrated the same. You might get different temperatures. So you're really going to have to pay attention whether it's your cold frame or in your plant room. It's good to know what kind of temps are hanging out at different parts of your room. So you can see there we got about 68.7 degrees with a relative humidity of 70%. So that's back here on the bench with all of these trees right now who were watered today. These were watered today, and I won't have to water them for a couple of days again. But a lot of moisture over here in the pots. And the room, we're not in the middle of winter yet. We're only October, so it's not that dry in the house yet. The heat was just turned on actually yesterday, so we don't have a ton of forced air coming in here yet. But there it's 68.7 degrees and 70 is the humidity. Pretty good levels. If my room can stay about 70, 75, I am really happy. And my trees seem to be happy. So we like that so far. And these ficuses, the Fukien tea, and all the Christmas cactuses and the jades, everything seems to really like 70, 75%. In my plant room, they've done really, really well. So about 10 to 12 feet away, on the fish tank with the bass in there and the little ficus forest under the purple and pink lights, you can see the thermometer over there is 72.5 degrees, but look at how much lower the relative humidity is. 7 whole points down to 63. So now I've seen these temperatures range by as much as 5 to 10 degrees in just this room, usually closer to 5. That's what it is right now, 5 degrees different. 4 to 5, and the relative humidity is about 7% different from front to back of the room. And this is right next to a fish tank too. Like most people's journey in bonsai, most of what I know comes from what I've read, what I watch also on YouTube and internet type channels. I get a lot from some of the greats, watching some of Ryan Neal, reading that great book I talked about, Michael Hagedorn's, other channels, and of course the Minnesota Bonsai Society, where I'm a member, and we talk about trees. And the one thing that never ceases to amaze me is how everybody has different results depending upon where they are, depending upon the species of tree, depending upon how early you water, how often you water, what kind of water your house has. All of those factors, right? I think I've talked about it over and over on the channel here. So you really have to get to know your water. You have to get to know your atmosphere. You have to get to know what your trees like. And I've mentioned it before. One of our members used to live where I live in Woodbury. He could have tamaracks. And now over in Afton, only about a 20-minute drive east, he can't grow them over there with the water that comes out of his well. So we have to make sure we don't have too hard of water, and we want to make sure it's not too neutral or acidic, more on the acidic side, right? Base versus acidic. We want to have it in that, typically in that 6 range, if we can. Between 6.5 and 7 is pretty safe. Anything over 8 starts to get really not what we want for the bonsai trees. So for my experience in my house, anything 65 to 85 humidity has been just fine. Now the more humid it gets in my house, I run the risk of getting mold on my walls. So I have a decent coat of paint on here. I can wash the walls pretty good. I got some remnant carpets, you know, with a hard cement floor in here. You don't want to come in here and have it a moldy mess. It's my house, right? And so I don't want it to get too high. So I also run a dehumidifier. And I have a dehumidifier in here, so sometimes when it gets a little bit too damp in here and it's getting up in there in that 80 range and higher, I want to curb it down just a little bit. But again, that's because I want to salvage the wood in here. I want to salvage the walls. I want to salvage the carpet. I don't want it to become this mold issue. And so these guys like it here with the lights that I have anywhere from 6 inches to a foot above the plants. And I have several. So I have several of these kind of almost a made-up par can. If you were in the lighting world, you got par cans that are just the cans that direct the light. Well, these are just the reflectors you might have in your garage for work lights. And they've got the LED lights in there, and they're just getting real close and personal with the trees. And they really seem to like it. This is a Unifun. And it has the reds and the blues and the whites and all mixed in there. And I've had it for about 3 years now, and it's done really, really well. I debate whether I get more of those and just string them up on the whole back side, because it does have a bigger spectrum for the light and the warmth and the heat that we need from that. But all the little pots and plants here really seem to like it right here. And they like the humidity at about 75%. And I've not had an issue even if it's gotten more dry. And again, I don't want it to go much more above 80 to 85, just so my stuff in here doesn't get bad. People talk about drip trays. So I got all these trays under here so I don't water my floor, of course. And so if you water and you leave the water in there, that's going to create that humidity. But if you really want some more humidity in your room, well, I have to recommend the fish tanks. If you like fish tanks, start up a fish tank again. I do have an outdoor pond, as you know, so I bring the fish in and have my goldfish, my other fish, and of course it keeps this a little bit more tropical and provides that moisture. But if you don't want the upkeep and maintenance of a fish tank, make sure you have some buckets of water. Make sure you have some drip trays in here. I got a bucket back here that is one of my plants from the pond. So that plant in there is in a 5-gallon bucket, and there's about 3 inches of water in the bottom. And I'll keep that about half full of water so I can try to keep that plant alive in here. And I might do a little bit of propagating with that. I keep some of my plants in the pond that can freeze and then come back. I've had success with my lilies. When I bring my trees in, after you bring them in from outside, don't be fooled or don't be surprised or don't be scared if you start to lose some leaves. So ficus trees are notorious for losing their leaves. And so this is the only one so far in here that has kind of like said, what's going on with this new location? So this is a watermelon seed ficus. And this guy was just a little tiny stick about this thick right here before, and now you can see I've got a good inch bottom trunk and a couple of multi-trunk looking tree here. But if I just shake this thing up, you can see that I'm losing some leaves. I got some yellow on the bottom. They're turning colors, and they're falling off. The stress of moving ficus just makes them kind of stand up and say, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? And so they start to lose their leaves. This has happened many times with me with different ficus that I own, and they come right back and do wonderful. So I'm not too worried at the moment. We'll keep an eye on it and make sure that we're not overwatering and make sure that this thing is going to come back and do wonderful things. So you can see all these leaves coming off, and that is going to be normal. So for those of you that haven't moved from outdoors to in yet, you've not done that in your bonsai career, if you will, your bonsai adventure, don't let that panic you. Everything else so far is looking pretty good. Oh, I just got to show the flower again. So here we go. This is this, I got this from a Bachman store. We have Bachman's Nursery in Minnesota. And it's this shiny leaf, almost kind of looks like it's a succulent. And it has a very woody trunk. And I noticed it had orange blossoms, orange little flowers in there when I saw it in the store. And I got it for a houseplant just because I thought it was so cool. Well, I noticed there was a lot of back budding on the woody looking trunk. So like a tree, it's going to get some woody looking trunk and it will back bud. So I've put a couple in bonsai pots and started to grow them. And this is the first year that I've had orange buds on them. Now that I've put them in bonsai pots and I'm keeping them watered, because I do much better with bonsai soil and bonsai care than my other pots and plants. So we'll talk about that tree in specific on a later episode, but I had to show it again because I love that it's blooming right now. And maybe it'll stop blooming by the time I make that episode. The plants that are liking life. The last one I'll show you real quick, just because I've had a lot of people talking about trees, is I got a lot of comments about the ficus, or the Fukien tea. So the Fukien tea, usually stops growing the moment it hits about February or January, because I bring it inside the house. It grows like this for another month or two, and then I go, hey, I should trim this, right? And then I do, and it stops growing completely until I get it outside. We get through spring, we get into summer, and then it starts to do this again. And here you have it. It's done it again. So if you go back and look at the episode with my Fukien tea, you'll see my trim, you'll see my original pot, and you'll see that it did the same thing. But now I do have some nice growth on it. And it's got a nice new one right over here. Got a nice new one back over here. Some of these guys right here are starting to split now in a couple different directions. So I'm just going to let it run wild, and maybe I won't cut it at all this winter. I think I'm just going to let it go, and maybe I'll cut it more in the summer because it is a tropical plant, and we do most of our transplants in the summertime. I think I might see what other people say about their Fukien tea. Please jot down some notes for me, send them my way. I'll check out your notes. Tell me what you've done for your success. It's grown, it still loves life. But this, if folks remember from my last show, this came way up here and came back over here. So I've lost 50% of my trunk main branch in the last year. But look at the growth on it. It's still very healthy and loving life. Got my little Egyptian hut right there. And I'm still fertilizing here from the late summer, early fall fertilization. So that's the Fukien tea. So there's a couple of the trees on the back table and the humidity discussion. Again, you got to do what's right for your room and your house and what you can maintain. I come down here every day. I'm monitoring it. I got the dehumidifier if I need to. I got the fish tank for more moisture. We're good to go. Get some drip trays, get a bucket of water, and you'll have some success with your plants. Just make sure you have enough light, and make sure the light's close enough to your trees so they don't get all long and leggy. The growth will be slower over the winter in my plant room, but the room will always be 65 to 75, and they'll have plenty of light. I could always use more, but plenty so far, and they'll be fine. For the life of me, folks, I can never remember the name of this plant. This plant was propagated and worked on with my son Toby at his high school several years ago. I believe he was a freshman, so we're talking about 4 years ago. When he started his freshman year, because now he's a freshman in college. And just this summer I had it outside, and it had all this palm looking leaves, and we came back from a vacation and the rabbits got it or something, and they completely gnawed it off right there. So right there is the gnaw off point, right there. And if you can notice, there's some bad scarring there and scarring there. It's like something tried to bite it there. It's almost like there's 2 teeth marks right there. So I thought it was toast. I just said, you know what? I think this has seen its last days. Let's just let it go. So one of the things that I want to remind people of too is don't throw your trees away just yet when you think they're dead. And even though I saw the mark from the rabbits and stuff, and I could still see kind of a cambium layer, I just kind of gave up on the tree. Now, this isn't a bonsai tree for me, but I think this relates to bonsai with all the cuts I make and the trees that have died or looked like they're dying. This has happened to me several times. So I put it in the garage where it got really no big light, no sunshine anymore. It was just in the garage. And I started to get this really light, pale, yellowy growth that came up here. And I went, oh my gosh, something is growing there. And so this right here curved up, and here's my new leader. So this was a huge major chop of a tree. No more foliage. In the garage. I wasn't watering it. And look what happened. It grew out. Now I have 5 to 6 inches of growth, multi-branches here coming out, and it's becoming a little mini palm tree all over again. So whether it is your house plants that are like this kind of a tree, or all your bonsai trees, we don't always have to be fearful with a major loss from a critter, or if we cut one too far back. On many species, they're going to bounce right back, and especially our tropicals. All of the ficuses I've worked with, when I make my cuts, I've always had more growth on my trees. I have yet to lose a ficus tree in my plant room or in my backyard. So they respond really well to pruning, the ones I've had, and all my trees have been doing really well. So there's an example again of how maybe put that tree off to the side, put it somewhere where you just kind of let it go for a while. And for me, I've done that, and then they come back and they just love life again. So we'll see what this thing does, and we'll put it in a nicer pot, and I won't probably have it as a bonsai, but I still love having green around my house. One last thing I want to make a quick mention about today is timers. So whether it's my fish tanks, my pond outside, or definitely the trees behind me and in the plant room, is I want to make sure they're getting light for a long enough time. And though I come in my room every day, every night, I just like the ease of the timers. And if I happen to be gone for the weekend, and I know I'm not going to have to water these for a couple of days, and I don't have to have anybody come in and help take care of my trees, I still want the lights to go on and off. So especially if you leave for the weekend and got some places to go ahead and grab yourself some timers, but make sure they're the 3-pronged ones. So you notice this one's loose and free. It's because it has 2 prongs, and I actually need a couple more that have 3 prongs. I just picked up 2 in the last week, but they're already occupied with my many tanks, and yeah, I got a lot of stuff. So get the 3-pronged ones, right? Not the 2. Then you can hook up your power strip of 3 or 4, and then hook all your lights. So these lights right back here, all of these lights right now are powered through my power strip, which is powered through the timer. And unless you get the bigger one that's rated for indoor and outdoor with the 3-prong, it's got the power to support these lights, and it's going to go ahead and do the turn it off and turn it on automatically according to the digital clocks in there. So I go with digital. I try not to get the poppy up ones anymore. These are true, they're consistent, and what I love about them, especially with my fan in my cold frame, as we talked about cold frames earlier, my fan goes off and on every hour. And so with the timer outside with the 3-pronged and the elements, and you got the extension cord with the 3-prong, that fan in that cold frame, as I mentioned earlier, goes off for about 15 minutes every hour to keep that air circulating. I do that in 2 with the lights in here as well. So get yourself a couple of nicer timers and make your job a little bit easier. Well, I think that does it, everybody, for another edition of Dave's Bonsai. I'm, of course, Dave Weiss. I love your comments. I love your questions. I love your inquiries. Please keep them coming and tell your friends about it. I'm over 320 members on YouTube, and I'm just tickled pink. I'd love to get to 1,000. That's my next goal, 1,000 or bust on the YouTube channel. So anything you'd like to see, like to have me talk about or share, I'm going to start sharing that. And I'm going to put a little teaser out here. I may just start to do some broadcasting with some live Facebook stuff, where I'm going to do just a half an hour of working on a tree and just talking about bonsai. I might explore that opportunity this winter. And I have so many trees in here that I can just kind of nip and tuck a little bit here and talk about my tropicals throughout the year, that I think I have enough to cover at least a couple times a month over the doldrums of winter when we don't have as much to do. So stay tuned for that. I hope you maybe can watch that someday. I'll give you information on future YouTube episodes. That said, I hope everybody continues to stay safe, and we'll see you on the next episode. All right, take care, everybody. Hey, everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. In the sense that I have a branch that splits into 2 shoots in here, so I'm probably going to cut this thing off right about here this fall. I've taken my knob cutter and I've gotten rid of some of that. So I just put them on the bottom, growing upwards into the bag. We fill it up with trees, and then we water as we need to.